The sky above the capital city of Ointh was not so much a weather system as it was a negotiation between gravity and a neon-soaked atmosphere. Great ribbons of violet and electric blue turbulence spiraled in the upper ionosphere, casting a bruised, flickering light over the gold and ivory spires of the city below. Elias Thorne wiped a smear of hydraulic grease across his forehead, leaving a dark streak that matched the grime under his fingernails. He was currently hanging upside down in the tertiary maintenance shaft of the Diplomat's Pride, a cruiser that sounded majestic on paper but was currently trembling like a wet dog in a thunderstorm. This ship was supposed to be the neutral vessel bringing the last delegation for the Galactic Peace Treaty. Instead, it was a failing bucket of bolts that Elias had been hired to keep airborne strictly because human mechanics were known for two things in this sector: their ability to fix systems that defied the laws of physics, and their total lack of political affiliation. In the rim worlds, being boring was a survival trait. "Hold it together, old girl," Elias muttered to the vibration humming through his boots. Just another hour. Below him, the docking ring was a chaotic ballet of localized gravity fields and desperate pilots. Shuttles darted like hummingbirds around the massive bioorganic architecture of the Ointhian station. The aliens grew their buildings rather than built them, singing the coral-like structures into shape over centuries. It was beautiful, admittedly. It also smelled faintly of cinnamon and ozone, a scent that Elias had learned was pumped into the air to mask the pheromones of stressed security guards. He dropped from the hatch, his magnetic boots clanking softly on the deck plating. The procession was already starting on the main concourse. Elias was not supposed to be there. He was grease. He was the help. But the secondary coolant valve on the port engine was reading a pressure spike that made his teeth itch, and the only access point was behind the ceremonial dais. He pulled his cap low and checked his tool belt: a hydro spanner, a multi-frequency tuner, and a roll of high-density bonding tape, the holy trinity of keeping flying coffins in the sky. The concourse was a sea of shimmering fabric and tall, slender Ointhian bodies. The locals were humanoid but elongated, with skin that held a pearlescent sheen and eyes that lacked whites, looking like pools of liquid metal. They moved with a fluid grace that made Elias feel like a sack of rocks. Then he saw her. Princess Eliana stood at the center of the inspection circle. She was the focal point of the entire treaty, the biological key to the alliance between the core systems and the warlord clans. She was stunning in a terrifying way. Her ceremonial armor was woven from white glass and silver filigree, hugging a frame that looked too delicate to carry the weight of an empire. Her hair was a cascading waterfall of bioluminescent strands, pinned back with combs that looked sharply dangerous. Elias paused, his hand hovering over the access panel he needed to open. He had seen hollows of her, of course, everyone had. The media called her the Jewel of the Rim. But up close, the resolution was higher, and the flaws were visible. Not physical flaws, emotional ones. She was smiling, a practiced curvature of lips that did not reach her eyes. Her eyes were silver, like the rest of her kin, but they were dull, tired. Her posture was rigid, suggesting she was holding her breath. Surrounding her were 6 members of the Royal Guard, hulking figures in golden carapace armor. They stood facing outward, weapons ready. But Elias noticed their heads kept tilting inward. They were watching the crowd, yes, but they were watching her just as closely. She is a prisoner, Elias thought, the realization hitting him with the blunt force of a dropped wrench. The High Chancellor, a man with a beard braided with data crystals, stepped up to the microphone. The live broadcast drones hovered like buzzing insects, beaming this moment to 12 billion screens. We stand today on the precipice of unity, the Chancellor boomed, his voice amplified by the station's acoustics. Elias ignored the speech and cracked the panel open. A hiss of steam escaped. He winced. The pressure gauge on the coolant line was vibrating violently. The needle was buried in the red. If that line ruptured during the ceremony, the explosive decompression would not just ruin the broadcast, it would turn the front row of dignitaries into a red mist. He had seconds. The manual release valve was rusted shut. Of course it was. Elias looked at the line, then at his tool belt. He grabbed the bonding tape and the hydro spanner. He jammed the handle of the spanner into the bypass gear, using it as a lever, and wrapped the tape around the seal, pulling it tight until the polymer stretched and heated. "You better hold," he whispered. He put his entire body weight on the spanner, forcing the bypass open. With a groan of metal that sounded shockingly loud in the sudden silence of the Chancellor's dramatic pause, the valve gave way. The pressure hissed out safely into the waste reclamation vents. The noise echoed like a gunshot. Every head in the concourse snapped toward him. The Royal Guard raised their weapons. The Chancellor looked apoplectic. Elias froze, still clinging to the open panel, covered in grease, holding a hydro spanner like a weapon. Princess Eliana turned her head. For a moment, the mask slipped. The boredom and fear vanished, replaced by a flash of genuine surprise. "Hold fire," the captain of the guard shouted, though his finger was tight on the trigger. Elias slowly raised his free hand. "I am just fixing the air conditioning," he said, his voice cracking slightly. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush a tank. Then, the princess laughed. It was a small sound, quickly stifled, but it broke the tension like a hammer hitting glass. The Chancellor cleared his throat, glaring at Elias, a minor technical difficulty. "The resilience of our infrastructure is adaptable." Elias scrambled down, wiping his hands on his trousers. He tried to blend into the wall, but a pair of guards marched him straight toward the royal party. Apparently, almost blowing up the delegation required an explanation. He found himself standing 3 feet from the princess. Up close, she smelled of cold rain and ozone. "State your name and purpose," the guard captain barked. "Elias Thorne, ship mechanic. The coolant line was about to blow." I improvised. The princess stepped forward. The guards tensed, but she waved them down. Her voice was melodic, creating a strange resonance in Elias's chest. "You risked your life to turn a valve. Master Thorne." It seemed better than the alternative. "Your Highness," Elias said. He tapped the side of his neck, activating his universal translator implant. He wanted to say, "Nice to meet you." The implant, bought secondhand on a mining colony, buzzed sharply against his skull. It processed the idiom, filtered it through high Ointhian court dialects, and projected his voice. "I accept your duel and await your blade," the translator announced in a deep, formal baritone. The Chancellor gasped. The guards leveled their rifles at Elias's head. Elias's eyes went wide. "No, wait. Bad translation. I meant, hello?" Princess Eliana stared at him. The corner of her mouth twitched. She looked at the terrified mechanic, then at her horrified Chancellor, and for the first time, her silver eyes sparked with actual life. "A bold opening move," she said softly. "But I am not armed for a duel today. Master Thorne, perhaps we can settle for you not dying?" "I would prefer that," Elias said, sweating profusely. She reached into the folds of her glass weave dress and pulled out a small hexagonal chip. It pulsed with a soft amber light. "For saving the integrity of the ceremony," she said, loud enough for the cameras, a token of gratitude. She placed the chip in his grease-stained hand. Her fingers brushed his palm. They were cold, but the contact sent a jolt of static through him that had nothing to do with the ship's wiring. As she pulled away, she leaned in, ostensibly to adjust her sleeve. "It opens the service corridors," she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "Don't lose it." Before Elias could process the fact that a royal princess had just given a random mechanic a master key to the palace's security sector, she was swept away by the entourage. The chancellor glared at him one last time, and the procession moved on. Elias stood there, gripping the warm chip. He looked at the guards who were now eyeing him with suspicion. She is reckless, Elias thought, or she is desperate. 2 hours later, Elias was in the depths of the palace, ostensibly checking the localized atmospheric recyclers. In reality, he was trying to understand why he hadn't thrown the badge into the nearest waste chute. The palace was a labyrinth of bioluminescent walls that hummed with a low-frequency song. It was beautiful, but it was also a fortress. The security here wasn't just cameras, it was scent-based trackers and pressure-sensitive floors. The badge the princess had given him, however, emitted a spoofing signal that made the systems ignore him entirely. It was a military-grade bypass, the kind spies killed for. He found himself in a ventilation gallery overlooking the grand hall. Below, the reception was in full swing. He could see the warlord's heir, a brute of a man named Valerius, wearing armor made of bones and velvet. He was laughing loudly, a sound that grated on the nerves. Elias adjusted his earpiece, tuning his diagnostic tool to pick up audio vibrations from the glass panes below. He told himself he was just checking for structural resonance. He was lying to himself. The audio crackled to life. "Succession clause is clear," a voice hissed. It was the Chancellor. "If she marries Valerius, the Regency Council assumes emergency powers for the duration of the honeymoon period." "And if she refuses?" another voice asked. A general, by the sound of the clipped tones. "She will not refuse. The gate priests have ensured her compliance. The quiet removal of the current lineage is necessary for the stability of the gate." Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. Quiet removal. Gate priests. He watched Eliana down below. She was standing next to Valerius. The warlord heir had his hand on the small of her back. It looked possessive, predatory. She stood rigid, a statue of ice in a room of fire. Suddenly, a drone buzzed over the crowd. It was painted in festive colors, designed to drop confetti. It hovered directly over the princess. Elias frowned. The flight path was wrong. It was erratic, twitching against the air currents. "Drop!" he shouted, though the glass muted his voice. On the floor below, something in the drone's mechanism clicked. It released a cloud of shimmering silver squares. To the crowd, it looked like celebration. To Elias, whose eyes were trained to spot distinct metallic sheens, it looked like monofilament razors. He didn't think. He didn't calculate. He slammed his fist into the fire suppression override on the wall next to him. Klaxon screamed. The halon gas dump triggered instantly in the hall below, creating a sudden violent fog and a blast of noise. In the confusion, Elias saw the princess look up, startled by the noise. The distraction made her take a half step back. The cloud of confetti descended where she had been standing a second ago, slicing through the heavy velvet of the tablecloth and shredding the floor tiles into dust. If she had been standing there, she would have been minced. Elias scrambled away from the vent as security teams swarmed the upper levels. He used the badge to slip into a waste disposal chute, sliding down 3 levels to the servants' quarters, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He had saved her. Again. And this time, he knew it wasn't an accident. He laid low for the rest of the afternoon, hiding in the mechanic's bay of the Diplomat's Pride. He should have left. He should have fired up the engines and requested immediate departure. But the image of the razor confetti and the dead look in Eliana's eyes kept him rooted. Around dusk, a service droid rolled up to the ship's ramp. It was a simple cleaning unit, but it carried a sealed envelope on a velvet tray. For the human mechanic, the droid chirped. Elias took the envelope. It was heavy, made of real paper, a luxury that cost more than his ship. He opened it. Inside was a single sheet of stationery. The handwriting was elegant but shaky, as if the person writing it had been fighting a tremor. The drone was not a malfunction. Thank you for the fire alarm. I cannot speak freely. The walls listen. Elias turned the paper over. There was nothing else. Then, the droid chimed again. Verbal message to follow. Decryption key. Gratitude. Elias stared at the machine. Play it. The droid's vocoder shifted, mimicking the soft, melodic voice of the princess. Human, come to my room tonight. I want to ask you something special. The message ended. The droid turned and rolled away. Elias sat on the loading ramp, staring into the neon storm swirling above. I want to ask you something special. It sounded like a seductive proposition. A lonely princess, a dashing rogue, a night of passion to forget the politics. That was the story the vids would tell. But Elias knew better. He had seen the razors. He had heard the Chancellor's treason. This wasn't a booty call. It was a summons to the executioner's block. If I go, I'm dead, he said to the empty ship. He stood up, wiped his hands on a rag, and checked his reflection in the hull. He looked tired. He looked like a man who made bad decisions for a living. If I don't go, she's dead. He sighed, grabbed his tool belt, and clipped the access badge to his collar. Hell of a way to spend a Tuesday. The corridors leading to the royal wing were silent. The badge worked perfectly, turning force fields into open doors and cameras into blind eyes. It was unnerving. He reached the heavy doors of her private quarters. They were made of grown pearl, shimmering with internal light. He didn't have to knock. They slid open as he approached, sensing the badge. Elias stepped inside. The room was vast, dominated by a ceiling that projected a real-time map of the galaxy. The walls were bioluminescent, glowing with a soft, breathing rhythm of indigo and teal. It felt like being inside a living heart. Princess Eliana was standing by the window, looking out at the chaotic city. She had shed the armor. She was wearing a simple tunic of gray silk, her feet bare on the moss-like carpet. She turned. Her face was pale, stripped of the ceremonial makeup. She looked younger and infinitely more terrified. You came, she said. You asked, Elias replied, keeping his hands visible. Though I have to admit, Your Highness, the invitation was a bit ominous. She didn't smile. She walked over to a control panel on the wall and ripped a bundle of wires out with her bare hands. The ambient music died. I disabled the audio pickups, she said, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. But the thermal sensors are still active. Stay away from the walls. She walked toward him, stopping only a foot away. The scent of ozone was stronger here, mixed with something sharp and metallic. Fear. Is it a trap? Elias asked bluntly. Am I the patsy for whatever happens next? No, she said fiercely. You are the variable, the one thing in this equation they didn't account for. She took a breath, steeling herself. I need you to perform a rite with me. Elias raised an eyebrow. I'm a mechanic, lady. Unless you need your spark plugs changed, I'm not your guy. I need an anchor, she said, stepping closer. The space between them crackled with tension. Elias stiffened. He knew about Ointhian anchors. It was a psychic bonding ritual, usually reserved for mates or bloodkin. It allowed two minds to resonate, to share sensory input and emotional states. "You want a bond with me?" Elias asked, his voice rising. "With a human? Isn't that illegal?" "It is forbidden," she corrected, "but I have no choice." She began to pace, her hands wringing together. "I am losing time. Elias, I wake up in rooms I didn't walk into. I sign documents I don't remember reading. My emotions, they feel muted, like I'm shouting underwater. They are drugging me, or using a psionic suppressor. The Chancellor? Him. The priests. My betrothed." She spat the word. "They need me to sign the gate authority transfer before the wedding. If I do, they control the ancient stargates. They can move fleets instantly. They can conquer the sector in a week. And you think you're about to sign it?" "I think I already have, and they wiped my memory of it." She stopped pacing and looked at him. Her eyes were desperate. "The anchor right forces truth. If you link with me, your mind becomes the bedrock. I can use your stability to flush the chemicals, to break the conditioning. I can see what they erased." Elias took a step back. "Lady, if I link with you, I see everything, your secrets, your fears, and you see mine. I don't care about your secrets," she snapped. "I care about my mind." She reached out, grabbing his hand. Her skin was burning hot now. "Please. You are the only one here who doesn't want something from me. You just fixed the ship. You just pulled the fire alarm. You are neutral." "I am not neutral," Elias said softly. "I am terrified." The romantic tension in the room was a physical weight. They were standing breath close. In her culture, this proximity was already a declaration of intent. Elias's human instincts were screaming two things simultaneously: run away and kiss her. He decided to do neither. He looked at her hand gripping his. He saw the tremble. "Okay," he said. She let out a breath that sounded like a sob. "Okay," he repeated, "but we have rules. Name them. First, I can stop at any time. If it gets too weird, if I feel like my brain is melting, I pull the plug. No retaliation, no executing me for treason because I saw you pick your nose in a memory. I swear it," she said instantly. She raised her left hand. Symbols glowed beneath her skin, a bioluminescent oath. "I swear on the light of the ancestors, you are free to leave. You are safe from my wrath." "Second," Elias said, his voice lowering, "you don't look. You use me as an anchor, but you stay out of my head. I have things I don't want seen." A shadow crossed his face. Memories of a burning engine room, of a scream he couldn't stop. "Agreed," she said softly. "Reciprocity is not required for the anchor, only resonance." She led him to a pair of low cushions in the center of the room. She produced a small device, a silver sphere that hummed. "Place your hand on this. I will place mine on yours." Elias sat. He felt ridiculous. He felt like he was about to jump off a cliff. He placed his hand on the sphere. Eliana sat opposite him. Her knees brushed his. She took a deep breath, her silver eyes locking onto his brown ones. "Do not fight the sensation," she instructed. "It will feel like falling." She placed her hand on top of his. The world vanished. There was no sound, only a sudden, violent rushing of wind. Elias gasped, but he wasn't breathing air. He was breathing light. He felt her. It wasn't like reading a diary. It was visceral. He felt the cold weight of the armor on her shoulders. He felt the phantom pain of the smiles she forced. He felt a crushing, suffocating loneliness that was so vast it nearly broke his heart in the first second. "Focus." Her voice echoed in his mind. It wasn't a sound, it was a thought placed directly into his cortex. He grit his teeth, grounding himself. He thought of his ship, ideally calibrated engines, the smell of grease, the solidity of a wrench. I am here, he thought back. I am the rock. She grabbed onto his mental presence like a drowning woman seizing a lifeline. The sensation shifted. They were diving, down through layers of fog. Gray mist swirled around them, the drugs, the suppression. Deeper, she urged. Where is the trigger? They hit a wall of black glass in her mind. A mental block. Artificial. Cold. Break it, she commanded. I can't, Elias thought. I'm just a mechanic. Then fix it. Dismantle it. Elias looked at the black wall with his mind's eye. He stopped seeing it as a psychological barrier and started seeing it as a faulty circuit. There, a loop, a logic gate that was stuck. He reached out mentally and pushed. The glass shattered. Memories flooded in, screaming. He saw a laboratory. He saw the chancellor standing over her while she was strapped to a chair. He saw a man in a white coat holding a hypodermic needle. But it wasn't a contract they were forcing her to sign. The man in the coat spoke, his voice booming in the memory. Subject is primed. Physiological key installed. Trigger phrase is, the stars await your command. The memory shifted. When she hears the phrase, her adrenal system will spike. Her pupils will dilate. She will be in a state of total suggestibility for 45 seconds. Enough time to command her to open the gate. And after, the chancellor asked in the memory. After, the doctor said, the neural load will induce a fatal cardiac event. It will look like a heart attack brought on by the joy of her wedding day. Elias ripped his hand away from the sphere. The connection severed with a snap that felt like a rubber band hitting bare skin. Both of them gasped, doubling over on the cushions. Elias was shaking. Ileana was pale, her eyes wide with horror. They keyed you. Elias wheezed, clutching his chest. The wedding. It's not a marriage. It's an assassination. Ileana looked at her hands. The trigger phrase. The stars await your command. It is the opening line of the wedding vows. She looked up at Elias, and the terror in her eyes was replaced by a cold, hard fury. They are going to kill me on live television. Before Elias could answer, the room's lights turned red. A siren began to wail, a low, mournful sound that vibrated the floor. The door panel flashed. Security lockdown initiated. Biological contaminant detected in royal quarters. Elias looked at the door. Contaminant. That's me. They know, Ileana whispered. The block. When you broke it, it must have sent a silent alarm. She scrambled to her feet, grabbing Elias by the collar of his jumpsuit. You cannot be here. If they find you, they will dissect you to see what you know. Elias stood up, his legs wobbling. Well, Your Highness, he said, a grim smile touching his lips as the heavy footsteps of the royal guard thundered down the hallway. I think you got your answer. Now, how are you at improvising? The door began to hiss as the override codes were punched in from the outside. Ileana looked at the door, then at Elias. Terrible, she admitted. Then stick with me, Elias said, grabbing a heavy decorative vase. We're going to have to get messy. The heavy doors of the royal suite sealed shut, muffling the sound of the lockdown sirens to a dull thrum. Inside, the air was thick with adrenaline and the lingering scent of ozone from the fried audio circuits. We cannot stay here, Princess Ileana said, her voice tight but controlled. She was already moving, stripping off her gray silk tunic to reveal a utilitarian body glove underneath. They will override the lock in 10 minutes. If they find you here, unescorted and human, they will not ask questions. They will just disintegrate you. Elias Thorne stood holding the decorative vase he had grabbed as a weapon, feeling distinctly foolish. He set it down. I am open to suggestions. Your Highness, Elias said. But unless you have a teleporter in your jewelry box, we are cornered. Eliana paused, her hand hovering over a hidden panel in the wall. I do not have a teleporter, but I do have a vacancy. She pressed the panel. A section of the wall slid back, revealing a narrow service chute and a rack of uniforms. They were not the sleek, armored suits of the royal guard, nor the flowing robes of the courtiers. They were puffy, bioluminescent orange jumpsuits with oversized collars. Sanitation and emergency maintenance, Eliana said. The lowest rung of the palace hierarchy. The guards do not look at them. The nobility certainly does not look at them. You are now the new junior waste recycling technician. Elias looked at the suit. It looked like a pumpkin had mated with a hazmat suit. You are joking, he said. It is that or the disintegrator, she replied, tossing him the bundle. Put it on. Quickly. 3 minutes later, Elias was regretting every life choice that had led him to this sector of the galaxy. The suit was made of a material that felt like rubberized velvet. It squeaked when he walked. Worse, the fit was designed for Ointhian physiology, long in the torso, narrow in the shoulders. Elias felt like he was being slowly strangled by a giant orange python. You look functional, Eliana said, eyeing him critically. She had thrown a heavy cloak over her own shoulders, hiding her face. I look like a festive sausage, Elias grumbled, tugging at the collar. Correction, a metallic voice chirped from the ceiling. You look like a festive sausage that is currently violating 7 codes of dress etiquette. Elias jumped, nearly tripping over his own boots. A small, spherical drone dropped from the ceiling vent. It hovered at eye level, spinning a singular red optical sensor between Elias and the princess. Introduce yourself, unit, Eliana said calmly. I am Royal Service Drone 734, the machine said. Primary function, custodial oversight and etiquette enforcement. Secondary function, witnessing the slow decline of the empire through the lens of poor fashion choices. We call him 7, Eliana said. 7, this is Elias. He is my special project. You are to log him as authorized staff. Access level, Gamma. 7 buzzed around Elias, scanning him with a beam of green light. Human male, high cortisol levels, grease stains consistent with unauthorized repair work. He is clearly a security risk. I like him. He smells like trouble. 7. Silence, Eliana commanded, though there was a hint of relief in her voice. Lead us to the lower maintenance sublevels via the ventilation shafts. We need to disappear before the Regent breaks down my door. The next 6 hours were a blur of claustrophobic tunnels, and Elias learning that Ointhian etiquette was essentially a minefield of politeness. They set up a temporary base in a decommissioned water filtration control room deep beneath the palace. It was damp, smelled of algae, and the only light came from the glowing moss on the walls. While Eliana paced, trying to establish a secure connection to the outside world, 7 took it upon himself to educate Elias on how to blend in. Do not make eye contact with anyone above the rank of sub-lieutenant, 7 instructed, hovering inches from Elias's nose. If a noble speaks to you, you must bow at a 45-degree angle. 46 degrees implies sarcasm. 44 degrees implies laziness. Do not be lazy, human. 45 degrees, Elias muttered, working on a data pad he had salvaged from the ship. Got it. Now can you stop hovering? You are blocking the signal. I am optimizing your workspace. 7 retorted, and protecting the princess's virtue. I saw the biometric readings from the suite. Your heart rates were synchronized. Disgusting. Elias choked on air. We were doing a medical scan. Seven spun his optic lens lazily. High blood pressure. Dilated pupils. I have access to romance novel databases. I know what a medical scan is code for. Seven, Eliana snapped from the other side of the room. Focus on the encryption. The drone whirred a sad little noise and floated away. Elias looked at Eliana. She was huddled over a map of the palace, the light from the moss casting long shadows across her face. She looked exhausted. The confident, icy princess of the inspection circle was gone, replaced by a woman who was carrying the weight of a world on trembling shoulders. Elias walked over to her. He didn't bow. We need to talk about the trigger, he said quietly. Eliana flinched. She touched her chest, right over her heart. The phrase, "The stars await your command." It is everywhere. It is the motto of the Ascension ceremony, which means the moment the ceremony starts. They own you, Elias said. We need to find the source. When we linked, I saw a text signature on the suppression block. It wasn't Ointhian. It was corporate Ethelgard Dynamics, Eliana said, her voice hard. They are the primary defense contractors for the Regent's fleet. They have a secure lab in the Spire district. Then that is where we start, Elias said. I can trace the signal back to the specific console that keyed you. If we can access their source code, I can write a counterscript, a patch. You want to patch my brain? I want to give you your firewall back. Eliana looked at him. For a moment, the distance between Royal and Mechanic vanished. Why are you doing this, Elias? She asked. You could have run. You have the badge. You could be in hyperspace by now. Elias looked down at his hands. Rough, scarred, stained with oil. I had a job once, he said, his voice low. A transport run. I heard a rattle in the drive core. I ignored it because I was behind schedule and the bonus was good. The core blew 3 parsecs out. 6 people died. He looked up, meeting her silver eyes. I spent 10 years telling myself I was just a mechanic, that I just fix machines, not problems. But this isn't a rattle. This is sabotage, and I am not running away from a broken engine again. Eliana held his gaze. Her expression softened, a genuine warmth breaking through the fear. You are a strange man, Elias Thorne. I am a festive sausage, he corrected with a half-smile. The investigation required them to move. The Regent, a man named Kalen who wore robes woven from gold and lies, was already on the feeds. He was broadcasting from the princess's empty balcony, looking solemn. The princess has been taken ill due to the stress of the upcoming nuptials. Kalen told the cameras. She is resting in a secure location. The wedding will proceed as planned to ensure the stability of the realm. He is tightening the noose, Eliana murmured as they watched the feed on Elias's datapad. We need proof of his plan. The text signature is a start, but we need legal evidence of the coup, the royal archives. 7 chimed in. If there is a secret amendment to the succession laws, it must be filed there. The archives record everything, even the whispers. The archives are alive, Eliana warned. They judge those who enter. Only the blood royal can authorize access. And a janitor, Elias pointed out, gesturing to his suit. Who do you think dusts the history books? The royal archives were a cavernous hall filled not with books, but with pillars of crystal that stretched into the darkness above. The air vibrated with a low, constant hum, the sound of millions of laws and histories being sung by the crystals. Getting in had been terrifyingly easy. Elias pushed a cleaning cart, and Eliana walked beside him, her face hidden by her cowl. The guards at the door saw the orange suit and their eyes glazed over. He was invisible, but inside, the atmosphere changed. The crystals pulsed as they walked past. The song grew louder, discordant. "They know you are not supposed to be here," Eliana whispered. "Stay close to me. Touch nothing." They moved deep into the section marked Succession and Regency. The crystals here were dark, pulsating with a heavy violet light. Eliana placed her hand on a central podium. Use the search parameters: emergency powers, Regent Kalen, date stamp, last 6 months. The podium glowed. A holographic display materialized in the air. Text scrolled by faster than Elias could read, but Eliana's eyes darted back and forth. "There," she pointed. Elias looked. It was a draft amendment. In the event of the monarch's incapacitation or marital transition, executive command of the gate defenses shall transfer to the office of the regent for a period of not less than 1 solar cycle. 1 solar cycle, Elias read. That's 5 years. "And there," Eliana said, her finger trembling as she pointed to a subclause. "Incapacitation defined as mental instability, medical coma, or death." "They are planning to put you in a coma," Elias said, a cold chill running down his spine. "The cardiac event the doctor mentioned. It won't kill you. It will just turn you into a vegetable so Kalen can rule in your name." Suddenly, the crystals around them flared red. The song turned into a shriek. "Intruder detected." A disembodied voice boomed, vibrating in their teeth. "Unauthorized presence." Elias grabbed the datapad and synced it to the podium. "Downloading it. Just give me 10 seconds. A guardian construct materialized from the floor, a swirling vortex of glass shards and light. It towered over them, raising a jagged arm. Eliana stepped between Elias and the construct. She pulled back her cowl. "I am Eliana of House Vexer, heir to the throne and keeper of the key," she shouted. "This man is under my protection. Stand down!" The construct paused. The glass shards hovered inches from Elias's face. It seemed to be sniffing him. "He is unclean," the archives sang. "He is of earth. He is with me," Eliana commanded. Her voice cracked with the force of her will. The construct hesitated, then slowly dissolved back into the floor. The red light faded to a wary orange. Elias yanked the drive from the podium. "Got it." They ran. Back in the filtration room, the tension was palpable. They had the proof, but proof was useless if they couldn't broadcast it. "We need to rest," Eliana said, slumping against a crate. "The archive. It drains the spirit." She looked pale. The stress of the conditioning fighting against her own will was taking a toll. "We should check the anchor," Elias said gently. "If the block is trying to reform, we need to push it back." She nodded. They sat on the floor, knees touching. 7 hovered nearby, dimming his lights to a respectful, albeit suspicious, low level. Elias took her hand. This time, there was no hesitation. "Resonance," she whispered. He felt the drop again. He entered her mind, but it was different this time. The fog was thinner. He could feel her gratitude, warm and golden. He could feel her fear, sharp and cold. And underneath it all, a growing heat, a desire that she was trying desperately to suppress. She felt him too. She felt his protectiveness. She felt the way he noticed the curve of her neck, the way he admired her strength. They opened their eyes, gasping. They were leaning forward, their faces inches apart. Elias could see the flecks of gold in her silver eyes. He could feel her breath on his lips. She leaned in, just a fraction. Eliana started. Elias's heart hammered. He wanted to close the gap. God, he wanted to. But he saw the exhaustion in her eyes. He remembered the power dynamic. She was a princess on the run. He was her employee, essentially. He pulled back. Just an inch. Are you okay? He asked, his voice rough. Is the block stable? Eliana froze. A flash of frustration crossed her face, followed quickly by understanding. She sat back, letting out a shaky breath. You are a very difficult man to figure out, she said, wiping a strand of hair from her face. I promised you safety, Elias said. That includes being safe from me. Warning, Seven interrupted, floating between them. Oxytocin levels are approaching critical mass. Shall I deploy a cold water spray? No, they both shouted. The moment was shattered by the sound of boots on the walkway above. Search the lower levels, a voice commanded. Eliana scrambled to her feet. The guards. They were cornered. 3 royal guards dropped from the upper gantry, landing with heavy thuds. Their weapons leveled instantly. There, one of them shouted. The human! Wait! Eliana stepped forward, assuming her royal posture despite the maintenance room grime. I am Princess Eliana. Stand down immediately. The guards hesitated. They looked at each other. Our orders come from the regent, the lead guard said, his voice amplified by his helmet. Secure the princess. Eliminate the contaminant. I am your future queen, Eliana shouted. The regent says you are compromised. The guard replied. He raised his rifle, aiming at Elias. Eliana realized with a sick, sinking feeling that her title was just a word. Power resided where men believed it resided, and right now, it resided with the man signing the paychecks. Run, she screamed. She grabbed a steam pipe valve on the wall and wrenched it open. A jet of superheated steam blasted into the walkway, engulfing the guards. They screamed, falling back in confusion. Elias grabbed Eliana's hand, and they sprinted into the darkness of the tunnels, Seven trailing behind them, emitting a high-pitched panic noise. They surfaced in the Smuggler's Port, a district of the city that hung beneath the main spires like barnacles on a ship's hull. It was dark, wet, and smelled of fuel and fried food. Elias led them to a dive bar called the Rusty Thruster. I know a guy, Elias explained as they ducked under a low-hanging cable. Jax. He owes me for fixing his hyperdrive with a coat hanger and some chewing gum. Jax turned out to be a 4-armed alien with an eye patch and a very large blaster pistol. He sat in a booth at the back, looking unimpressed as Elias and the hooded princess slid into the seats opposite him. Elias, Jax grunted. You look like a traffic cone. Nice to see you too. Jax, I need info. Jax leaned back, crossing 2 of his arms. Everyone needs info. It costs. Elias slapped the data pad with the archive files on the table. This is big. Jax, bigger than smuggling runs. Jax scanned the data. His single eye widened. Regency takeover? That's bad for business. War is good for selling guns. Bad for shipping routes. What do you know about Project Lattice? Elias asked. Jax went still. He looked around the bar, then leaned in close. That's not something you say loud. Mechanic. Lattice isn't a weapon. It's a door. A door? Eliana asked. The Stargate, Jax whispered. The old one. The priests say it's a temple. The Corps say it's a battery. But the rumor is it's a network. Instant travel to anywhere in the galaxy. No ships, no travel time. Elias looked at Eliana. That's why Kalen wants it. If he can move troops instantly, borders mean nothing. He could drop an army into the Senate chamber of the core worlds. He would rewrite history, Eliana said, horrified. Jax tapped the table. There is more. Ethelgard Dynamics isn't just building the interface. They are looking for a key. Biological. They say the gate only opens for a specific genetic sequence. The plan was simple. Break into the Ethelgard Dynamics lab, steal the data core containing the gate protocols, and expose the whole thing. Simple, Elias noted as they crouched on the roof of the corporate tower. Usually implies not impossible. This is bordering on suicidal. I prefer optimistically daring, Seven chirped. I have hacked their climate control. The ventilation fans are off. They rappelled down the shaft. Elias moved with the practiced ease of someone used to crawling in ducks. Eliana was surprisingly agile, her movements fluid and silent. They dropped into the server room. It was a forest of black monoliths, cooling fans whirring softly. Find the main terminal, Elias whispered. Eliana moved to the console. I'm in, but it is encrypted. Allow me, Seven said. The drone plugged a data spike into the port. While the progress bar loaded, the room suddenly plunged into darkness. Then, soft pink spotlights washed over the room, and a slow, sultry jazz saxophone track began to play over the intercom. Seven, Elias hissed. What are you doing? Setting the mood, Seven replied. Stealth requires darkness, romance requires ambiance. I am multitasking. Turn it off, Eliana whispered, though she was suppressing a laugh. I am trying. Seven word. Their security system is oddly configured. The music is stuck. Elias shook his head and moved to help Eliana at the console. The file is here, she said. Project Lattice, Gate Activation Protocols. She opened the file. A holographic DNA helix spun in the air. That is the key, Eliana said. It's a match pattern. They have been scanning populations for decades trying to find a descendant of the gate builders. Elias looked at the helix. It looked familiar. Not the science, but the pattern. It looked like the birthmark on his shoulder. Wait, he said. He placed his hand on the scanner pad. The system beeped. Green lights flooded the console, overriding the pink mood lighting. Match confirmed. The computer announced, Welcome, Builder. Eliana stared at him. Elias stared at his hand. You. She breathed. It can't be. Elias stammered. I'm from Earth. I'm nobody. Jack said the gate builders were an ancient expedition, Eliana said, her mind racing. Humans who were lost centuries ago. Your ancestors didn't just find the gate, Elias. They made it. The realization hit them both at the same time. The reason the archive construct had hesitated, the reason Elias could fix impossible systems. He had an intuitive connection to the technology because it was written in his blood. Before they could process it, the blast doors slammed shut. Security alert. Biological key secured. Containment team inbound. We need to go, Elias said, grabbing the data drive. They sprinted for the exit, but the corridor was blocked by a squad of corporate security troops. There is no way out, Eliana shouted. Elias looked at the server stacks. He looked at the heavy power cables running along the ceiling. Improvise, he muttered. He threw his hydro-spanner at the main junction box. Sparks showered down, igniting the coolant gas. Smoke filled the hallway. Through the window, Elias yelled. We are on the 40th floor, trust me. He grabbed her waist and fired his grappling line, part of the stolen maintenance gear at the neighboring building. He kicked the glass out. They swung out into the neon-lit void of the city, the wind screaming in their ears. Seven trailing behind them like a panicked balloon. They landed hard on a landing pad 3 blocks away, rolling to a stop. They were alive. They had the data. They knew the secret. But as they caught their breath, a giant holographic billboard above them flickered to life. Regent Kalen's face appeared. Larger than life. Citizens of Ointh, the regent announced, his voice grave. I come to you with heavy news. The princess has been kidnapped by a radical terrorist faction led by the human mechanic, Elias Thorne. A grainy image of Elias appeared on the screen, the moment from the ceremony where he held the hydro-spanner like a weapon. He has brainwashed her using illegal chemicals. Kalen lied smoothly. But fear not. We have moved the wedding forward to ensure the safety of the realm. The ceremony will take place in 48 hours. Elias stared up at the screen. His face was plastered across the entire city. Terrorist, he whispered. Eliana stood up, her jaw set. They moved the wedding, she said coldly. That means they are ready to open the gate. She turned to Elias. They don't just need me anymore. Elias, they need you. You are the key. Elias looked at the data drive in his hand, then at the princess who was looking at him not as a servant, but as the only hope she had left. 48 hours, Elias said. Then we better get to work. He clipped the drive to his belt. Where is the gate? Eliana pointed to the sky, where the twin moons hung low and heavy. The moon of Xylos, the forbidden zone. Then that's where we're going, Elias said. 7. Plot a course. Route calculated, the drone said, sounding unusually serious. Probability of survival, low. Probability of romance, rising. Shut up. 7, they both said, and began to run. The rain in the lower districts of Ointh did not fall so much as it drifted, a heavy, oily mist that coated everything in a sheen of bioluminescent grime. Down here, far beneath the ivory spires and the curated air of the upper city, the capital was a sprawling, suffocating organism of neon signs and desperate commerce. Elias Thorne pulled the collar of his stolen sanitation suit higher. The orange fabric was now smeared with soot, helping him blend into the kaleidoscope of the street market. Beside him, Princess Eliana moved with a stiff, unnatural gait. She was trying to walk like a commoner, hunched and hurried, but centuries of posture training fought her every step. Keep your head down, Elias murmured, his eyes scanning the crowd. Overhead, a patrol drone swept the street with a fan of red laser light. It played a recorded message on a loop, the voice cheerful and terrifying. Citizens, please report any sightings of the human contaminant. A substantial reward is offered for biological containment. They ducked under the awning of a stall selling grilled swamp newts. The smoke smelled of garlic and burning tires. Eliana stared at the scene around her. She saw a mother washing a child with gray water from a reclamation pipe. She saw a group of laborers huddled around a trash fire, gambling with bits of scrap metal. She saw the raw, unpolished reality of her empire. I did not know, she whispered, her voice thick with something that wasn't just fear. Didn't know people were poor? Elias asked, checking the charge on his data pad. I did not know they were forgotten. Eliana touched a rusting support beam. The palace feeds show us happy workers, songs of unity. This is a graveyard with neon lights. She looked angry. It was a good look on her. It burned away the princess in distress vibe and replaced it with the steel of a ruler who had just realized her kingdom had been stolen long before the coup. We have to keep moving, Elias said. We need to get to the diplomatic sector. The high custodian of the gate priests is attending the Gala of Moons tonight. If anyone knows how to get to the Forbidden Moon without getting shot out of the sky, it is him. Eliana nodded, her jaw set. Then we go to the party. Infiltrating the diplomatic gala required two things: credentials and a lack of self-preservation. They acquired the first by hacking a dry-cleaning delivery drone and stealing 2 formal outfits intended for a minor delegation from the nitrogen belts. The lack of self-preservation they already had in abundance. They changed in the cramped maintenance closet of a gravity lift. Elias found himself in a suit of dark, iridescent scales that shimmered green when he moved. It was tight in the chest and loose in the legs. Eliana wore a gown of heavy structured velvet that covered her from chin to floor, accompanied by a veil that obscured her features. Before they left the closet, Elias stopped her. "Turn around," he said. He held up a small device he had cobbled together from the parts of his datapad and a scavenged radio. It looked like a hearing aid made of junk. "What is that?" Eliana asked. "A jammer," Elias explained. "I analyzed the frequency of the trigger phrase in your memory. This little guy emits a counterpulse. If someone says the magic words, this should scramble the audio signal before it hits your auditory nerve." He tucked it behind her ear, his fingers brushing the sensitive skin of her temple. "It is not perfect," he warned. "It might give you a migraine. And if the battery dies, you are open season. So if you hear a buzz, trust the buzz, not the voice." "Thank you," she said softly. They stepped out of the lift and into the glittering ballroom of the floating embassy. The room was a sea of power. Ambassadors from a dozen systems mingled with corporate sharks and military officers. The air smelled of expensive perfume and hypocrisy. Eliana navigated the crowd with an ease that Elias envied, even under the veil. She moved like she owned the floor. She signaled for drinks, deflected questions with non-committal hums, and steered them toward the VIP dais where the High Custodian sat. The High Custodian was an ancient Ointhian, his skin like cracked parchment, draped in the heavy crimson robes of the Gate Order. He was surrounded by guards, but they were temple guards, not the regent's men. As they approached, a voice cut through the ambient chatter. "The stars await." Elias froze. Eliana flinched violently. A high-pitched whine emitted from the device behind her ear. She stumbled, grabbing Elias's arm for support. "Are you okay?" he hissed. "Headache," she gasped. "Sharp. But I am still me." It worked. The speaker was just a poet reciting a verse near the buffet, unaware he had almost triggered a royal assassination. They reached the High Custodian. Eliana leaned in close. "Great Custodian," she whispered, slipping into the High Court dialect. "One seeks the truth of the lattice." The old alien looked up, his milky eyes narrowing. He did not see a nitrogen belt delegate. He saw the posture, he saw the desperation. "The lattice is closed to tourists," the Custodian rasped. "It is open to the key," Eliana said. She pulled back her glove, revealing the glowing oath mark on her hand, a symbol known only to the highest order. The Custodian's teacup rattled in its saucer. The private sanctum. Now, the meeting did not go as planned. The moment they entered the private viewing room, the temple guards locked the doors. The Custodian stood, casting off his frailty. "You should not be here, child of Vexer. The regent has declared you dead." "I am very much alive," Eliana said, removing her veil. "And I know about the transfer. I know Kalen intends to hand the gate to Ethelgard Dynamics." The Custodian spat on the floor. "Heresy. The gate is not a toll road for corporate fleets. It is a sacred engine. Then help us." Elias stepped forward. The scales of his stolen suit rustled. "We need passage to the moon of Xylos. We need to get to the physical interface before the wedding." The Custodian looked at Elias. He stared for a long, uncomfortable minute. Then, he shuffled forward, producing a scanning wand from his robes. He waved it over Elias. The wand hummed a deep, resonant note. "Earthblood," the Custodian muttered. "The lost builders." He looked at Elias with something approaching awe. "The prophecy speaks of the return," the Custodian said. "When the iron bird falls, the builder shall rise from the grease." Elias blinked. "It actually says grease?" "It is a metaphor for humble beginnings," the Custodian snapped. "We have the data core." Eliana pressed. "But we need a ship." The regent has locked down the airspace. The custodian paced, his robe swirling. To help you is treason. If I am caught, the order will be purged. If you do not help us, Elias said, leaning against a statue of a three-headed fish. Kalen is going to turn your holy temple into a gas station for his warships. So, pick your poison. The custodian's translator droid, a floating golden orb. Word. The prophet speaks, the droid announced in a booming voice. He says, the sacred flame creates ash, or the ash creates the flame. Choose the path of burning. The custodian's eyes went wide. The path of burning. A radical interpretation. He demands a holy escort. Elias looked at Eliana. I did not say that. Eliana kicked him in the shin. He absolutely said that. She told the priest, we accept the holy escort. The extraction was chaotic. The custodian smuggled them out through the kitchen loading docks and onto a shuttle painted with the sacred symbols of the order. As they blasted off, leaving the atmosphere of the capital behind. The city lights below looked like a spreading infection. But the relief of escape was short-lived. The news feeds on the shuttle's dashboard were screaming. Tragedy at the gala. The headline flashed. Terrorist plot foiled. Princess Eliana confirmed deceased in tragic accident. Memorial service to be held concurrently with the gate activation. They killed me, Eliana whispered, staring at the screen. I am not even dead yet, and they have already buried me. They needed the body count to match the paperwork, Elias said grimly. This means the timetable is moved up. They are not waiting 48 hours. They are doing it tonight. The shuttle dropped them at a remote maintenance airlock on the dark side of the moon of Xylos. The pilots, terrified of the storms that wrapped the moon, refused to stay. They dumped the cargo, Elias, Eliana, and the ever-complaining Drone 7, and blasted off. They were alone. The landscape of Xylos was a nightmare of impossible geometry. The ruins here were not built. They were calculated, towering obelisks of black stone twisted in spirals that hurt the eyes. The ground hummed. Gravity here was a suggestion, not a law. Rocks floated inches off the ground. They found shelter in a vault that smelled of ozone and ancient dust. Outside, the storm raged, throwing lightning that was purple and silent. Elias checked his gear. He had a laser cutter, his hydro spanner, and a singular energy pistol he had liberated from the shuttle. We have a 3-mile hike to the gate interface, Elias said. Eliana was sitting against the wall, her knees pulled to her chest. She was shaking. Hey, Elias said, kneeling beside her. You okay? The jammer still working? It is not the jammer, she said. It is the silence. She looked at him. When they announced my death, I felt relief. For a second, I thought, finally, I am free. She laughed, a brittle sound. That makes me a monster, does it not? To be glad my people think I am dead so I do not have to be their symbol anymore? No, Elias said. It makes you sane. He sat next to her. The air in the vault was cold, but between them the air felt charged. The empathic link, dormant since the archive, flared to life. Elias felt her grief. It wasn't a heavy, crushing thing anymore. It was sharp, like broken glass. He felt her fear, but underneath it, he felt a massive, swelling admiration. For him. She was looking at him, and the link carried her thoughts like a whisper. She admired his hands. She admired the way he didn't bow. She admired that he smelled like engine oil and rain. Eliana gasped, realizing he could hear her. She tried to pull back, to wall off her mind. Don't, Elias whispered. He reached out and took her hand. The link surged. Eliana felt him. She felt his insecurity, the deep, gnawing belief that he was a failure because of the crash years ago. She felt his awe of her, not as a princess, but as a fighter. And she felt his desire. It was a physical weight, warm and heavy. They leaned in. The world outside, the storm, the regent, the impending war, faded. There was only the heat of their skin and the hum of the bond. Elias's hand moved to her cheek. Her skin was soft, trembling. Elias, she breathed. He wanted to kiss her. He wanted to pull her into him and forget that they were probably going to die in an hour. But he stopped. His thumb brushed her cheekbone, and he pulled back a fraction of an inch. "If we do this," he whispered, his voice rough, "we do it because you choose it, not because of the adrenaline, not because of the link, and not because you are scared." Ileana looked at him, her eyes searching his face. She felt his restraint through the link. It wasn't rejection. It was respect. It was the loudest declaration of care she had ever experienced. In a life where every movement she made was dictated by protocol or coercion, he was giving her the one thing she never had. A pause. "Thank you," she whispered. She leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his. They stayed like that for a long time, just breathing. Two anchors in a storm. The moment was broken by 7. Alert. The drone buzzed, dropping from the ceiling, multiple thermal signatures detecting on the ridge. Atmospheric displacement consistent with dropships. "They are here," Elias said, the softness vanishing from his face. "Ethelgard." They moved out into the storm. The ruins of the gate interface lay ahead, a massive ring of floating stones that framed a vortex of swirling dark matter. Around it, a camp had been set up. Floodlights cut through the purple gloom. Soldiers in matte black armor were patrolling. "They are setting up the resonance dampeners," Ileana noted, looking through a pair of electro-binoculars. "They want to force the gate open with brute energy. If they do that without the key," Elias said, "the feedback loop will crack the moon in half. We have to stop them." The ambush was not graceful. It was a scramble. Elias slid down a scree slope, firing the energy pistol at a generator. The explosion drew the eyes of the patrol. "Intruders!" a commander shouted. Ileana moved. She didn't have a gun. She had a collapsible baton she had taken from the shuttle's emergency kit. She moved like water. She vaulted over a piece of floating rubble, slamming the baton into the helmet of the nearest trooper. She fought with a terrifying precision. Every strike was calculated to disable. She used the low gravity to her advantage, leaping impossibly high, twisting in the air. Elias, meanwhile, was doing what he did best, breaking things. He sprinted for the heavy loader mech parked near the gate. He scrambled up the side, hot-wiring the access panel while laser fire chewed up the metal around him. "Come on, you bucket of bolts," he yelled. The mech roared to life. Elias didn't use the loader's claws to fight. He used them to grab a massive floating obsidian pillar. "Catch!" He shouted over the external speakers. He hurled the pillar at the enemy formation. In the low gravity, the multi-ton rock flew like a missile, smashing into the line of tanks and scattering the troops. But there were too many of them. A sniper shot clipped Elias's shoulder. He cried out, the mech stumbling. "Elias!" Ileana screamed. She broke cover, running toward him. She raised her hand, and the oath mark on her skin flared with blinding white light. "Back!" she commanded. It wasn't a request. It was a royal voice command, amplified by the ambient energy of the ruins. The soldiers froze, their neural implants seizing up in response to the ancient authority code. It bought them seconds. They reached the base of the gate. The hum here was deafening. The air tasted of metal. A central pedestal stood before the swirling vortex. It had 2 handprints indented into the surface. The data core, Elias yelled, clutching his bleeding shoulder. Plug it in! Eliana jammed the drive into the slot. The gate didn't open. Instead, a holographic avatar appeared. It was a woman, human, wearing an ancient flight suit. Unauthorized access, the avatar spoke. Single biosignature insufficient. Dual resonance required. What? Elias shouted over the roar of the wind. System requires a pair bond. The avatar continued. One mind to navigate, one mind to anchor. Synchronization must be absolute. Eliana looked at Elias. It is not just DNA. She realized, the builders. They didn't just use tech. They used empathy. To navigate the space between stars, you need someone to hold you together. Elias looked at the handprints. We have to link, he said, fully. No barriers, no secrets. If we do that, Eliana said, her voice trembling, there is no going back. We will be bonded. I will be in your head, and you will be in mine. Forever. Behind them, the Ethelgard troops were shaking off the command stun. A tank turret swiveled toward them. Elias looked at the princess. He saw the soot on her face, the fire in her eyes, and the terrified girl hiding behind the royalty. I would rather be stuck in your head than die alone in this mud, he said. He held out his hand. So, Your Highness, he said, a crooked grin breaking through his pain. I guess this is the part where I ask you something special. Eliana looked at his hand. She looked at the approaching army. And then she looked at him. Ask me, she said. Will you be my equal? He asked. Not a princess, not a boss, just my partner? She slammed her hand into his. Yes. They slammed their free hands onto the pedestal. The world turned white. The blinding white light did not transport them to a new world. It transported them inward. When Elias Thorne blinked the spots from his vision, he found that the storm-lashed ruins of the moon of Xylos had vanished. Instead, he and Princess Eliana were standing in a spherical chamber of polished obsidian. The air here was perfectly still, smelling of sterile ozone and old static. The roar of the battle outside, the corporate troopers, the tanks, the screaming wind, was gone, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like pressure against the eardrums. He looked at Eliana. She was still kneeling beside him, her hand gripping the edge of the control pedestal. She looked terrified, her chest heaving, her silver eyes wide and searching the darkness. Where are we? She whispered. Are we dead? You are in the antechamber of resonance, a voice replied. It was not the holographic avatar this time, but a vibration that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Synchronization is currently at 14%. Critical failure imminent. Calibration required. 7. The service drone dropped from the ceiling with a startled beep. I am detecting 0 external threats, the drone announced, its red optics spinning. However, I am detecting massive levels of awkward tension. Also, we appear to be inside a giant computer processor. Elias stood up, helping Eliana to her feet. He checked his shoulder. The sniper wound was gone. Or rather, it was numb, covered by a shimmering patch of nanites that the room had apparently provided. We are inside the gate's operating system, Elias realized, running a hand over the smooth black wall. It sensed us. It pulled us in to finish the pairing. The voice returned. The path requires 2 minds. 1 will. You are 2 minds, 2 wills. Dissonance detected. Commence integration. The floor beneath them shifted. It did not move mechanically. It flowed like liquid, reshaping itself into 2 seating pods facing each other, separated by mere inches. Sit, Elias said, the mechanic in him taking over. It wants to tune us, like aligning a hyperdrive. If the frequencies do not match, the engine tears itself apart. Eliana hesitated. To align. That means no barriers. Elias, we do not have a choice, Your Highness. Outside this room there is an army waiting to turn us into ash. Inside here, we just have to deal with feelings. I will take the feelings. They sat. The pods were warm, molding to their bodies. Place your hands on the interface. The room commanded. They reached out. Their palms met in the space between the pods. As their skin touched, the room dissolved. It was not like the first time they had linked in the palace. That had been a glimpse, a chaotic rush of surface thoughts. This was a deep dive. Elias felt the sensation of cold water closing over his head. Then, he was not Elias anymore. He was Eliana. He felt the heavy, suffocating weight of the silk dresses. He felt the phantom itch of the ceremonial makeup that she, was never allowed to rub off. He stood on a balcony, looking down at a cheering crowd, and he felt the crushing terror that one wrong wave, one wrong smile would cause the stock markets to crash or a treaty to fail. He saw her memories not as a movie but as lived experience. He saw her father, the late king, looking at her not with love, but with appraisal. You are the vessel, the king had said. You are the lock on the cage. Never forget that your life is the only thing keeping the monsters out. Elias felt her internal scream. She was not a person. She was a piece of infrastructure. She was a dam holding back a flood, and she was terrified that one day she would crack and drown everyone she loved. Then the perspective slammed into reverse. Eliana gasped as she was pulled into Elias's mind. She expected to see grease and engines. Instead, she saw a spaceport terminal, sterile and bright. She felt the arrogance of a young man, Elias, 10 years younger, brilliant and proud. She saw a woman with grease under her fingernails and a laugh that sounded like music. Mara. She felt Elias's hesitation. He had seen the microfracture in the shuttle's hull. He had known, statistically, it was a risk. But the schedule was tight. The pay was life-changing. And he had wanted to prove he could keep the fleet moving. It will hold, the young Elias had said. I am the best. It will hold. She felt the moment the news came in. The shuttle had disintegrated on re-entry. Mara was gone. And then she felt the aftermath, the shame. It was a black, oily thing that coated his soul. He had run. He had taken low-paying jobs in the outer rim, refusing to touch anything important, refusing to be responsible for another life. He hid behind the persona of the grumpy mechanic because if he didn't care, he couldn't kill anyone. The connection broke. They were back in the obsidian room, gasping for air, their hands still pressed together. You walked away, Eliana whispered, her voice trembling. I was a coward, Elias rasped, tears pricking his eyes. I thought I was God's gift to engineering. I was just a kid with an ego. And you? Elias looked at her, his eyes raw. You think you are a weapon. You think if you make a choice for yourself, the world burns. That is what they taught me, she said, pulling her hands back, hugging herself, that my desire is dangerous, that my freedom is selfish. The room hummed, synchronization at 42%. Dissonance persists. We cannot force this, Elias said, wiping his face. We need a minute. While they recovered, Seven projected a holographic display from his internal databanks. I hate to interrupt this emotional devastation, the drone chirped, but we are receiving a signal from the surface. The Regent is busy. The hologram showed a news feed. Regent Kalen stood on a podium, flanked by the warlord's heir, Valerius. Behind them, the sky was full of dropships. The princess has been compromised, Kalen was saying, his face a mask of sorrow. The human terrorist has used a neural parasite to corrupt her mind. The woman you may see or hear is not our Eliana. She is a puppet. We must secure the gate to save her soul. He is good, Elias admitted. He is spinning the story so that even if you scream the truth, they will just say it is the parasite talking. Eliana stood up, pacing the small confines of the room. We need to broadcast, she said. The gate must have a comms array. If I speak, not as a princess, but as the keeper, they might listen. She turned to the wall. Archive, access communication suite. The wall shimmered and produced a console. Eliana's fingers flew across the light keys. Broadcasting on all frequencies, she commanded. For a brief second, the static cleared. Eliana stared into the pickup sensor. People of Ointh, this is Eliana. There is no parasite. The regent is... The screen went black. A laughing skull icon appeared. Signal jammed. The console read, Traitor protocols active. Regent Kalen's face appeared on their private link. He smiled, and it was the smile of a man holding a royal flush. Nice try, my dear, Kalen said smoothly. Did you really think I would leave the microphone open? You are starting a war, Eliana said, her voice icy. I am ensuring peace, Kalen corrected. By the time the galaxy realizes what happened, my fleet will be in the Senate Rotunda. The treaty is just a distraction. The gate is the weapon. He leaned closer to the camera. Give up. Eliana, come out. Marry Valerius. We can still pretend this was a fever dream. Eliana severed the connection. She stood shaking, her fists clenched at her sides. He is right about one thing, she said. The gate is a weapon. No, a voice croaked from the corner. The High Custodian, the old priest who had smuggled them there, stepped out of the shadows of the room's periphery. He looked terrified. The gate is not a weapon. It is a test. He pointed a shaking finger at the console. If you open it for war, the gate will know. The builders designed it to reflect the intent of the user. That is why it requires resonance. If you bring hate into the chamber, the gate will amplify it until it consumes you. So we leave it sealed? Elias asked. We must, the priest cried. Sealed or stolen. If Kalen takes it, he dies. If you open it, you risk unleashing the void. Eliana looked at the priest, then at Elias. If we leave it sealed, Kalen wins, she said. He will drill through the casing eventually. Or he will just bomb the moon until he cracks it open. She stepped toward the central pillar. Sealed or stolen, either way people die. I would rather face the truth than hide behind fear. She looked at Elias. We have to finish the calibration. We have to open it before he does. The room shifted again. The obsidian walls dissolved into a chaotic swirl of gray fog and floating geometric shapes. Phase 2, the voice announced, navigation. This part was not about memory. It was about trust. Gravity vanished. Elias and Eliana floated in a void filled with shifting corridors of light. To reach the core, you must move as one, the voice instructed. A massive spinning blade of energy manifested between them and the exit. Elias instinctively reached for his thruster controls on his suit. Don't! Eliana shouted. It reacts to fear! The blade spun faster, slicing the air inches from Elias's nose. Calm your mind, she ordered. It is a giant blender, Elias yelled. I am fairly alarmed. Look at me, Eliana commanded. Elias locked eyes with her. She was floating 10 feet away. She reached out her hand. Trust me, she said. Elias took a deep breath. He focused on her face. He focused on the silver of her eyes. He let go of the fear of the blade and held on to the image of her. The blade slowed. It transformed into a gentle breeze of light. They drifted forward, hand in hand. But the tests got harder. The corridor twisted into a maze of logic puzzles that required them to complete each other's thoughts. One door was a wall of living metal that swarmed with nanites. "The key is pain," the door whispered. "Share the burden," Eliana cried out as the nanites latched onto her arm, burning like fire. Elias didn't hesitate. He grabbed her arm, covering the nanites with his own hand. He didn't try to pull them off. He pushed his mind into the link. "Give it to me," he thought. He felt the searing pain transfer to him. He gasped, his knees buckling in the zero-gravity void. "Why did you do that?" Eliana cried, trying to pull away. "Because I am not leaving you," he gritted out. The metal wall sensed the sacrifice. It shivered and retracted. They fell through the opening, landing hard on a platform of solid light. Elias lay on his back, breathing hard. His arm was red and blistered. "You are an idiot," Eliana said, dropping beside him. Her hands hovered over his injury, trembling. "You could have lost your arm." "I have two," Elias joked weakly. She didn't laugh. She looked at him with a fierceness that stopped his breath. "You are always doing that," she said. "Throwing yourself in front of the danger, no, the drone, the steam pipe, the nanites. Someone has to keep the princess safe." "I do not want a bodyguard," she shouted, her voice echoing in the void. "I want—" She stopped. The silence stretched, heavy and electric. "What do you want, Eliana?" Elias asked softly. "I want you to be safe too," she whispered. "I want you to stop punishing yourself for the shuttle crash. You are worthy of living. Elias." She leaned down, her face inches from his. "You are not just a mechanic. You are the only person who has ever seen me. Not the title. Me." Elias looked up at her. He saw the sweat on her brow, the dirt on her cheek, the raw honesty in her eyes. "And you are not a symbol," he said. "You are the bravest person I have ever met, and I am terrifyingly in love with you." The words hung there. He hadn't meant to say them. They just fell out, like a loose bolt finally dropping free. Eliana stared at him. Then a small, genuine smile broke across her face. "Terrifyingly?" she asked. "Horrifyingly," Elias confirmed. "It is awful. I am sweaty and bleeding and I can't stop looking at you." "Warning," Seven interrupted from the periphery. "Heart rates are synchronized. Dopamine levels are critical. If you two do not kiss, I am going to initiate a self-destruct sequence out of sheer boredom." Eliana laughed. It was a free, bright sound. She closed the distance. It wasn't a desperate kiss or a frantic one. It was slow. It was deliberate. It was a question and an answer. As their lips touched, the world exploded into white again. Resonance achieved. The room boomed. Authorization granted. They were back in the obsidian antechamber, but it had changed. The walls were now transparent, showing the storm outside. The central pedestal was glowing with a steady, golden light. They stood up, still holding hands. The energy flowing between them was no longer jagged. It was a hum, a steady current that made them feel faster, sharper, stronger. Elias looked at the gate controls. "We can open it," he said. "We can send the signal to the Senate. We can expose Kalen before his fleet moves." "Do it," Eliana said. Elias reached for the panel, but before his hand touched the surface, the transparent wall in front of them dissolved. The antechamber was not a separate dimension. It was just a shield, and the shield had just dropped. They were standing on the high dais of the ruins, and below them, the landscape had changed. The Ethelgard troops were drawn up in formation. Tanks, dropships, and hundreds of soldiers in dress uniform stood in perfect rows. And in the center, directly at the foot of the stairs leading to the dais, was a wedding altar. Regent Kalen stood there, smiling. He was wearing his high ceremonial robes. Beside him stood Valerius, the warlord's heir, looking impatient and checking his chrono. And behind them, a massive camera drone hovered, beaming the image to the entire galaxy. "Ah," Kalen's voice boomed over the loudspeakers. "Right on time." He spread his arms. "Citizens of the galaxy, behold! The princess has been rescued from the terrorists' lair." Kalen looked up at Eliana and Elias standing on the dais. "Bring them down," he commanded the guards. "It is time for the wedding." But the guards didn't move. They couldn't, because the gate behind Elias and Eliana had started to spin. Eliana stepped forward. She didn't look at the guards. She looked at the camera. "There will be a wedding," she said, her voice amplified by the gate's acoustics. "But not the one you planned." She squeezed Elias's hand. Regent Kalen laughed. "You have nowhere to run, child. You are surrounded." "We are not running," Elias said. He triggered the console. The gate didn't just open a wormhole. It opened a window. Above the dais, a massive rift tore open in the sky. But it didn't show another star system. It showed the interior of the Regent's private flagship, currently in orbit. It showed the bridge crew, and on the main tactical screen behind them, clearly visible to everyone on the ground and watching the broadcast, was a file labeled Operation Silent Dagger, Preemptive Strike on Core Worlds. The silence on the battlefield was absolute. Valerius, the warlord's heir, looked up at the giant screen in the sky. He squinted, then he looked at Kalen. "You told me we were peacekeeping," Valerius rumbled. "That is an invasion plan." Kalen's smile faltered. That is a fabrication, a hologram. "Is it?" Eliana asked. She raised her hand. The gate hummed. "Let's find out." She turned to Elias. "Are you ready to rewrite the rules?" "Always," he said. Kalen screamed, "Kill them! Kill them now!" The troops raised their weapons, and the wedding ceremony began with a volley of laser fire. The volley of laser fire that erupted from the Ethelgard ranks did not tear Elias and Eliana apart. Instead, it slammed into an invisible wall of distorted gravity 10 feet from the dais. The gate, awake and irritated by the sudden influx of aggression, had generated a kinetic barrier that shimmered like oil on water. The lasers dissipated into harmless sparks of violet light, raining down like confetti at the wedding that was never meant to happen. The noise was deafening. The wind on the moon of Xylos had risen to a scream, whipping dust and ice crystals into a frenzy. Above them, the rift in the sky, the window showing the invasion fleet, pulsed with an erratic, sickly rhythm. The hum of the ancient machine beneath their feet grew deeper, vibrating through the soles of Elias's boots and rattling his teeth. It sounded less like a machine running and more like a predator growling low in its throat. "Cease fire!" Regent Kalen screamed, his voice amplified over the howling wind. "Stop shooting, you idiots! You will damage the interface." The firing stopped, replaced by the heavy mechanical thud of walking tanks repositioning and the click of hundreds of weapons cooling down. Kalen stepped forward, stopping just outside the range of the gravity distortion. His ceremonial robes whipped around him, but his face was a mask of calculated calm. He looked up at the dais, ignoring the princess, fixing his gaze solely on the mechanic. "Mr. Thorne," Kalen called out. His voice was smooth, carrying the practiced cadence of a politician who knew the value of a reasonable tone in an unreasonable situation. Elias stood in front of Eliana, his hand hovering near the datapad strapped to his belt. He was sweating, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. "I am listening," Elias shouted back, "though I usually charge extra for consultations during an active firefight." Kalen smiled, thin and sharp. "You are a practical man, Elias. I have read your file. You are not a revolutionary. You are a man who fixes broken things and moves on. You like clean engines and quiet paychecks. The regent gestured to the army behind him. This situation is broken beyond repair. If you force that gate open, you die. If you keep it closed, my troops will eventually breach that shield, and you die. There is no victory here for you. Kalen took a step closer, holding up a small data chip. But there is an exit. Walk away. Step off that dais, disconnect the interface, and I will give you a transport ship, a new identity, and enough credits to buy your own moon in the outer rim. You can disappear. You can survive. Elias felt Ileana stiffen behind him. He could feel her fear through the anchor link, a cold spike of terror that he would take the offer. He squeezed her hand, sending back a pulse of reassurance, but he kept his eyes on Kalen. "And the princess?" Elias asked. "She has a duty to perform," Kalen said dismissively. "A marriage, a unification. She remains. You go. It is a simple equation." Elias looked at the chip in Kalen's hand. He looked at the army. Then he looked at the rift in the sky, showing the fleet poised to kill millions. "It is a great offer," Elias said. 10 years ago, I would have taken it." He stepped forward, leaning against the invisible barrier. "But I have a new rule. Regent. I do not leave the job until it is finished, and I definitely do not leave my partner behind. So you can take your credits and shove them into your airlock." Kalen's face hardened. The mask of civility vanished, replaced by the sneer of a man who was done negotiating. "Very well," Kalen said. "If you will not be bought, you will be broken." He turned his gaze to Ileana. "Daughter," he said, his voice dropping an octave. "You have had your tantrum. Now, you will submit." He raised a device in his hand, a small black remote, and pressed a button. Ileana cried out. The heavy ceremonial necklace she had been forced to wear, which she had assumed was just gold and gems, suddenly constricted. It wasn't jewelry. It was a maglock collar, disguised as finery. It tightened around her throat, choking her, while magnetic cuffs on her wrists snapped together, pinning her hands in front of her. Kalen raised his voice, shouting the words that had been burned into her amygdala. "The stars await your command." The effect was instantaneous. Ileana's pupils dilated until her eyes were entirely black. Her knees buckled. She fought it, her body trembling violently, sweat beading on her forehead. But the conditioning was a physical force, bypassing her will and hijacking her motor functions. She fell to her knees on the hard stone of the dais. "Ileana!" Elias shouted, dropping to grab her shoulders. She looked at him, but she didn't see him. Her expression was blank, a terrifying emptiness where her spirit used to be. Kalen laughed, a cruel barking sound. "Look at her, mechanic. Look at your partner. She is not a leader. She is a construct, a doll made to kneel." He gestured to the camera drone hovering above. "Broadcast this. Let the galaxy see their queen on her knees, waiting for my order." Elias stared at Ileana. He could feel her inside the link. She was screaming, trapped behind a wall of static and chemical commands. She was drowning in shame. The humiliation was the weapon. Kalen wanted to break her image so thoroughly that she could never lead again. Elias looked at the army closing in. The shield was flickering. They had minutes, maybe seconds. He could not outshoot them. He could not outfight them. But he was a mechanic. And he was standing on the greatest piece of engineering in the universe. "7!" Elias yelled to the drone hovering frantically above them. "I am currently calculating our life expectancy," the drone shrieked. "It is 4 seconds." "Stop calculating and start networking," Elias ordered. "Connect me to the gate's perimeter defense nodes. Bypass the logic processors. Route everything through the manual override. But that is unsafe, Seven protested. We are way past safe. Do it. Seven extended a data spike, jamming it into the console. Elias grabbed his data pad. He didn't try to hack the tanks. He hacked the ground they stood on. He tapped into the gravity plates of the ruins. Let's see how you march on a floor that doesn't know which way is down, Elias muttered. He swiped his finger across the screen. Gravity inversion in Sector 4. The ground beneath the front line of Ethelgard troops suddenly shifted. It didn't crack. It flipped. The gravity in a 50-yard radius reversed instantly. Hundreds of soldiers, 3 tanks, and the Regent's podium were launched violently into the air. Screams erupted as troops flailed in 0G, colliding with floating debris. Elias swiped again. Magnetic pulse. Localized. The floating tanks slammed into each other as their hulls became magnetized. Weapon systems shorted out in showers of sparks. Kalen, clinging to a floating statue, looked horrified. Fire! The Regent screamed. Kill him! A sniper took a shot. The laser bolt whizzed past Elias's ear, singing his hair. Elias ducked behind the console. 7, status! The drone spun its optic. Defense systems active. Also, I have an urgent notification. Is it air support? Elias yelled, rerouting power to the shield. No! 7 chirped, the sound echoing absurdly over the battlefield. According to your biometrics and the princess's stress levels, your romantic compatibility score has just reached 99.9%. You are practically soulmates. Elias stared at the drone. A grenade exploded 10 feet away, shaking the dais. 7, Elias shouted. I am going to melt you down into a toaster. It seemed relevant. The drone defended itself. Down in the chaos of the battlefield, the line was breaking, but not just because of gravity. The gate priests, seeing the sacred ruins desecrated by corporate tanks, had made a choice. The high custodian stood on a ridge, his robes whipping in the wind. Defend the temple, the old priest roared. The temple guard, armed with energy pikes and religious fervor, charged into the flank of the Ethelgard mercenaries. It was madness. High-tech soldiers were being bludgeoned by monks. The orderly formation of the invasion force collapsed into a brawl. On the dais, Elias crawled back to Eliana. She was still kneeling, tears streaming down her blank face. The conditioning held her body in a vice grip. Eliana, Elias whispered, placing his hands on her cheeks. Listen to me. He didn't use words. He used the link. He poured everything he had into her mind. He didn't push. He offered her the memory of the wind on her face when they swung from the tower. He offered her the feeling of the hydro spanner in her hand, the weight of agency. He offered her his own stubborn refusal to quit. You are not a doll. He projected into the static of her mind. You are the one who broke into the archive. You are the one who saved me. Stand up, inside the prison of her mind. Eliana heard him. The trigger phrase was a wall, but Elias was the door. She focused on his voice. She focused on the anger she felt, not the cold, paralyzing fear, but the hot, righteous fury of a woman who had been used for the last time. My choice, she thought. My life. Her hand twitched. Kalen, who had managed to magnetize his boots to the floating debris, saw her movement. Kneel, he commanded again. The stars await. Shut up, Eliana screamed. She didn't just break the hold, she shattered it. She surged to her feet, the magnetic cuffs snapping with the force of her movement and the surge of adrenaline. She stood tall, the wind tearing at her dress, looking down at the Regent floating helplessly in the gravity field. I command the stars, she yelled, her voice breaking with raw power. And I command you to get off my moon. She turned her gaze to Valerius, the warlord's heir. He was crouched behind a piece of rubble, looking confused and terrified as the civil war raged around him. "Valerius," Eliana called out, "look at the sky." She pointed to the rift. "Do you see the fleet? Those are not your ships. Those are Ethelgard's ships. Kalen promised you an empire, but he is sending his own men to occupy the core. You are not a partner. You are the fall guy. When the war starts, he will blame the warlord clans and he will use that fleet to wipe your people off the map." Valerius looked at the screen. He saw the markings on the ships. He saw the truth. The brute rose to his full height. He looked at Kalen. "You lied," the warlord roared. "Warlord." Valerius turned his massive rotary cannon not on the princess, but on the regent's personal guard. "Treachery," Valerius bellowed. "Clan Vexer, attack the suits." The battlefield turned into a three-way war. The warlord's troops turned on the corporate mercenaries. The priests struck from the sides. And in the center, Elias and Eliana stood in the eye of the hurricane. Elias looked at her. She was magnificent. She was terrifying. He grabbed her hand. "We have to end this," he said. "The gate is destabilizing. The conflict is feeding it too much chaotic energy." They turned to the console. The regent, seeing his plan disintegrating, went mad. He activated his personal jet boots, launching himself from the debris field toward the dais. "No!" Kalen screamed, drawing a heavy pulse pistol. "It is mine!" He fired. Elias saw it coming. He didn't think. He didn't calculate the odds. He just moved. He stepped in front of Eliana. The pulse blast hit him in the chest. It didn't kill him instantly. The stolen armored suit absorbed the heat. But the kinetic impact was like being hit by a train. Elias was thrown backward, slamming into the console. He slid to the floor, gasping, blood bubbling at the corner of his lips. "Elias!" Eliana shrieked. She looked at Kalen, who was landing on the dais, raising the gun for a second shot. Something inside Eliana broke. It wasn't her spirit. It was her restraint. She reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out a small silver cylinder. It was a prototype device, royal tech that had been banned for a century, a sonic resonance emitter. She didn't hesitate. She activated it and screamed. The device amplified her voice 1,000 times, focusing it into a physical beam of sound. "Get away from him." The sound wave hit Kalen. It shattered his pistol. It shattered the armor on his chest. It threw him backward off the dais, flinging him into the swirling vortex of the gravity field below. Eliana dropped the device and fell to her knees beside Elias. "Elias, please," she begged, pressing her hands to his chest plate. Elias coughed, gripping her hand. "I'm okay," he wheezed. "Ribs are toast, but I'm okay." He looked at the console. It was sparking. The gate was howling now. The rift in the sky was tearing wider, and through it, the images were flickering. They saw futures. They saw a version of reality where Kalen won, a gray, industrial universe of slaves. They saw a version where the gate collapsed, taking the moon and the system with it. They saw a version where they ran, living in hiding while the galaxy burned. "We have to choose." Elias gasped. Eliana looked at the images. None of them were right. "We choose the truth," she said. She grabbed Elias's hand and hauled him up. They leaned against the console together. "7," she commanded. "Can you interface with the gate's quantum broadcast array?" "I can," the drone replied. "But the bandwidth is infinite." "What are we sending?" "Everything," Eliana said. She pulled the data core from her pocket, the one they had stolen from the lab. Upload Kalen's files, the invasion plans, the financial trails, the secret orders. Broadcast it to every screen, every data pad, every holovision in the Allied systems. "Truth mode," Elias grinned through the pain. I like it. They slammed their hands onto the panel. The gate shrieked. The rift in the sky turned blinding white. Across thousands of light years, on billions of screens, the programming was interrupted. The regent's face appeared, not in a speech but in his private recordings. The invasion maps flashed. The bank transfers to the pirate guilds were displayed. The lie was stripped bare. On the battlefield below, the fighting slowed. Soldiers were checking their wrist comms. Commanders were receiving the data. The justification for the war evaporated in seconds. But the gate was not done. The surge of energy required to broadcast across the galaxy was too much for the damaged interface. The hum turned into a rattle. The floating stones began to crack. "Warning!" Seven yelled. "Core overload! The dampeners are failing. The gate is collapsing." The white light of the rift began to turn a sickly, bruised purple. A suction force started to pull at the air. The gravity inversion expanded, tearing chunks of the moon's surface upward into the vortex. It is going to implode, Elias realized. It is going to create a black hole. "We have to stabilize it," Eliana cried, her fingers flying across the controls. "We can't. The physical locks are melted." Elias looked at the readings. There was only one way to hold the field together while it wound down. It needed a conscious mind to act as the dampener. A living CPU to hold the logic together while the power drained. "One of us has to go inside," Elias said quietly. Eliana froze. Inside? Inside the neural network. To hold the door while the other one shuts down the power manually from the outside. She looked at him. She knew what that meant. Whoever went inside the network during a collapse might not come out. Their mind could be scattered across the quantum foam. "I will do it," she said instantly. "It is my burden." "No," Elias said. He shoved her. It wasn't a hard shove, but it was enough to push her away from the central pedestal. "You are the queen," Elias said, his voice steady despite the pain in his chest. "You have a galaxy to rebuild. I'm just the mechanic." "No!" Eliana screamed, lunging for him. Elias slammed his hand onto the neural interface. "I love you," he said. The world dissolved. Elias's body went limp, held upright only by the magnetic clamps of the machine. His mind was gone, sucked into the storm of data. Eliana fell against him, grabbing his shoulders. Elias, above them. The rift began to close. The gravity stabilized. The broadcast ended. The gate was shutting down, guided by a ghost in the machine. But Elias Thorne was not moving. Eliana stared at his closed eyes, the roar of the dying machine fading into a terrifying silence. She felt for the bond, for the anchor link that had connected them. It was there, but it was faint. It was like a radio signal drifting into deep space, getting quieter and quieter. He was drifting away. "Stay with me," she screamed into the void of his mind. "Do not you dare leave me." But the gate was hungry, and it had taken its price. The universe did not end with a bang. It ended with the sound of breaking glass. Eliana did not know if she was breathing. She did not know if she still had lungs. When she had plunged her mind into the neural interface to follow Elias, the physical world, the wind-scoured moon, the screaming armies, the treacherous regent, had shattered into a billion shards of glittering data. She was falling. Around her, the interior of the gate was a storm of impossible geometry. Gravity folded in on itself like origami. Memories floated past her like sheets of glass. Her father signing a treaty. Elias fixing a hydrospanner, a nebula being born, a child crying in the lower districts. The colors were violent, bruised purples, screaming neons, and a white so absolute it felt like silence. "Elias!" she screamed. Her voice was not a sound. It was a command code rippling through the lattice of light. She found him at the center of the storm. He was not a man anymore. He was a pillar of agonizing light. He was holding the collapsing architecture of the wormhole together with nothing but his own stubborn will. The data stream was flaying him, peeling away his memories, his personality, replacing them with cold logic and calculation. He was becoming the dampener. He was dying to keep the door from slamming shut on the galaxy. Eliana slammed into him. The impact sent a shockwave through the reality field. She wrapped her arms around his waist, or what she perceived as his waist, and dug her heels into the shifting void. "Let go," Elias's voice roared in her mind. It sounded distorted, metallic. "Get out." "Eliana, the collapse is critical. I have to hold the line." "No," she shouted back. She didn't pull him away. She didn't try to drag him out. Instead, she pushed herself in. She merged her consciousness with his. She felt the crushing weight he was carrying. It felt like holding up a mountain with wet paper. The pain was absolute. It burned through her neural pathways, setting every nerve on fire. "You idiot!" Elias cried, his human voice breaking through the metal. "You will die. Why are you doing this?" "Because I am not a widow," she screamed, forcing her mind to stand beside his against the tide of entropy. "And I am not a martyr's excuse for a statue." She grabbed his face, his real face, which she manifested through sheer force of will amidst the chaos. "Listen to me. Elias Thorne, you think this is noble? You think erasing yourself to save me is love? It is not love. It is just another way of running away." Elias flinched. The storm raged around them, tearing at their edges. "I walked away once," he shouted, tears of light streaming down his face. "I left Mara. I survived when she didn't. I will not survive you. I am doing this for you." "That is not your choice to make," Eliana countered, her anger burning hotter than the starfire around them. She shook him hard. "Love is not dying for someone. Elias, that is easy. Dying is final. Love is staying. Love is dealing with the mess. Love is looking at me across the breakfast table after the world is saved and figuring out how to be happy. You do not get to make me the reason you gave up." The truth of her words hit the center of the simulation like a hammer. The logic of the gate wavered. The ancient machine, built on resonance and intent, paused. It was confused. It understood sacrifice. It understood command. It did not understand two people arguing about the domestic responsibilities of survival in the middle of a supernova. Elias looked at her. The metallic sheen faded from his eyes. He saw her terrified, furious, magnificent face. He realized she was right. He wasn't holding the gate because it was the only way. He was holding it because he was afraid of what came after. He was afraid of being happy and then losing it again. "I don't know how to stop it," Elias whispered. "The energy load. It is too heavy for one mind. If I let go, the moon cracks." "Then we don't hold it alone," Eliana said. She looked up into the swirling data stream. "7!" she screamed. Outside, on the physical plane, the service drone was currently trembling in the air above the dais. "I am not equipped for this," 7 shrieked. "My warranty specifically excludes metaphysical events and black holes." Inside the construct, Eliana's voice boomed like a god. "7! We need a third node. We need to triangulate the signal." "But I am a toaster with anxiety," 7 replied via the link. "You are a sentient processing unit with a direct uplink to the priest's staff and the planetary grid." Elias's voice joined hers. 7. "We are going to distribute the load. We are going to build a lattice. Eliana is the anchor. I am the navigation. You are the structural integrity." The drone beeped, processing noises that sounded suspiciously like a panic attack. "Fine," 7 yelled. "But I am charging hazard pay. Triple rate. And a vacation day. The drone extended its interface spikes. It flew down to the High Custodian, who was still chanting prayers on the ridge. "Excuse me." "Holy One," Seven chirped. "I need to borrow your stick." The drone jammed its connector into the crystalline top of the High Custodian's staff. "Initiating distributed neural lattice," Seven announced. Inside the gate, the crushing weight suddenly lifted. It didn't disappear, but it spread out. The pain stopped being a spear through Elias's chest and became a heavy blanket over 3 points of contact. Eliana, Elias, and the drone formed a triangle of light in the void. "Now," Elias commanded, "we don't fight the collapse. We guide it. We spin it down like a gyroscope." They moved together. It was intimate in a way that made the physical act of touch seem clumsy. Eliana felt the sharp, electric wit of the drone. She felt the rough, warm, protective instinct of the mechanic. And they felt her, the steel spine of a queen who refused to break. They grabbed the edges of the reality tear. "Together," Eliana shouted. They pulled. On the surface of the moon, the war had stopped. It is hard to fight when the sky is doing impossible things. The Ethelgard troops, the warlords' clans, and the priests all watched in silence as the blinding white rift began to spin. It spiraled inward, changing from a ragged tear into a perfect circle. The purple bruising faded. The screaming wind died down to a whisper. Regent Kalen, who had managed to crawl out of the debris field, watched with wide, bloodshot eyes. "No," he hissed. "It should be destroying them." He scrambled toward a communications unit on a fallen tank. "All ships," Kalen screamed into the mic. "Fire on the ruins. Destroy the interface. If I can't have it, no one can." The order went out to the fleet above, but the fleet did not fire. On the bridge of the flagship. The captain looked at the order, then looked at the tactical screen where the truth broadcast was still looping Kalen's secret financial records. "Belay that order," the captain said quietly. "Lock weapons on the Regent's coordinates. Down on the ground." Valerius, the warlord's heir, stepped over a pile of rubble. He loomed over Kalen. The Regent looked up, trying to summon his old authority. "Valerius, secure the prisoners. They have bewitched the gate. They are using sorcery to deceive the fleet." Valerius reached down. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply ripped the communications badge off Kalen's chest. "It is not sorcery." "Regent," Valerius rumbled, his voice deep as a landslide. "It is a receipt." He held up his own datapad. It was playing a recording from the broadcast, Kalen's voice, clear and crisp. "The warlord is a blunt instrument. We will use his clans to absorb the casualties, then glass their homeworlds once the Senate capitulates." Valerius played it again. Then he dropped the pad on Kalen's chest. "I choose not to be a blunt instrument," Valerius said. He signaled his guards. "Take him. If he speaks, gag him. If he resists, well, I am sure he will have a tragic accident." Inside the gate, the storm was ending. The three of them hovered in a space of quiet, golden light. The violent memories were gone. The pain was gone. Seven disconnected first. "I am overheating," the drone announced. "My logic processors are 60% poetry right now. It is disgusting. I am logging off." The drone vanished from the construct. It was just Elias and Eliana. They floated in the golden silence, face to face. "We did it," Elias whispered. "It is stable. We can shut it down safely." Eliana looked at him. She reached out and touched his face. Her fingers brushed his cheek, and the sensation was more real than anything in the physical world. "You came back," she said. "I didn't," Elias corrected. "You came and got me." He looked at her with a vulnerability that stripped him bare. "You were right. Eliana, I was using the sacrifice as a shield. I was scared that if we survived this, I wouldn't be enough for you. You are a queen. I fix pipes. Ileana laughed. It was a sound like bells in the quiet void. Elias, she said, drifting closer. Look at us. We just outthought an ancient supercomputer and dismantled a coup with a drone and a stick. Do you really think I care about your job title? She wrapped her arms around his neck. I do not want a hero. Elias. Heroes die, I want a partner. I want someone who will argue with me when I am being stubborn. I want someone who knows how to fix the things I break. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. I choose you. Not because of the bond, not because of the danger. I choose you because you make me brave. Elias closed his eyes, exhaling a breath he felt he had been holding for 10 years. I choose you, he whispered back, high maintenance and all. As they embraced, the gate pulsed one last time. It wasn't a warning. It was an acknowledgement. The golden light flared, searing into them. It didn't hurt. It felt like a lock clicking shut. Primary keys registered. The system whispered, cycle complete. The world faded to white. They woke up on the stone floor of the dais. The silence was absolute. The wind had died. The hum of the machine was gone. The gate stood before them, dark and dormant, a simple ring of stone against the stars. Elias groaned, rolling onto his back. Every muscle in his body felt like it had been run through a centrifuge. Ileana, he croaked, I am here. She was lying next to him, staring up at the sky. The rift was gone. The stars looked normal. She sat up slowly. She looked at her hands, on the back of her right hand and on the back of Elias's left. The skin was marked. It wasn't a scar. It was a pattern of intricate silver fractals that seemed to shimmer under the surface of the skin. It looked like starlight caught in a vein. The mark of the builder, a voice rasped. The high custodian hobbled up the stairs, leaning heavily on his staff. He looked at their hands, his eyes wide. You are bound, the priest said softly, to the gate and to each other. As long as you live, the door will answer only to you. Elias sat up, rubbing his new tattoo. Great, he muttered. Does it come with a user manual? Ileana stood up. She smoothed her torn, dirty dress. She wiped the blood and soot from her face. She didn't look like a mess. She looked like a survivor. She reached down and pulled Elias to his feet. Come on, she said. We have a ride to catch. The return to the capital was not a quiet affair. The shuttle landed on the main promenade, directly in front of the Senate House. The crowds were already there, millions of them. They had seen the broadcast. They had seen the war in the sky. When the ramp lowered, it wasn't Regent Kalen who walked out. It was Princess Ileana. She wore a fresh uniform, not a dress, but a military-style coat she had borrowed from the warlord's supplies. It was too big in the shoulders, but she wore it like armor. Her hair was pulled back. She wore no jewelry. Elias walked half a step behind her. He had refused to clean up. He wore his grease-stained mechanic's jumpsuit, his boots scuffed, his face bruised. A hush fell over the crowd. Ileana stepped to the microphone. She didn't use the royal voice. She used her own. Citizens of Ointh, she said. Her voice carried across the plaza, clear and steady. Today, the lie ended. She gestured to the screen behind her, where Valerius was currently escorting a handcuffed Kalen into a detention cell. There will be no forced marriage, she declared. There will be no secret wars. The Regency is dissolved. The Senate will be reconvened immediately to address the crimes of the former administration. She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. I was taught that my value was in my bloodline. I was taught that I was a symbol to be traded for stability. But symbols do not bleed. Symbols do not choose. She turned and reached out her hand. Elias stepped forward. He took her hand. The silver marks on their skin flared briefly, visible to everyone. "This man is Elias Thorne," Eliana said. "He is not of noble birth. He is a mechanic from Earth. He is also the reason we are all alive today." She squeezed his hand, and for the first time in history, a royal princess smiled a genuine, unguarded smile on live television. "He is my partner, in strategy, in battle, and in life." The crowd was silent for a heartbeat. Then, a roar started at the back and rolled forward like a tide. It wasn't polite applause. It was a cheer. Elias leaned in, keeping his voice low so only she could hear. "You know," he said, "this is going to make getting a dinner reservation impossible." Eliana didn't look at him, but her thumb stroked the back of his hand. "We will order in." 7 days later, the dust had settled. Regent Kalen was awaiting trial. Valerius had returned to the warlord clans, having signed a non-aggression pact that was actually worth the paper it was written on. The priests were currently debating whether Elias was a messiah or just a very annoying inconvenience. Elias was under the sink in the royal suite, fixing a leak. "Old habits die hard," he muttered, tightening a flange. Seven hovered nearby, holding a towel. "I have submitted my invoice for the emotional distress of the mission," the drone announced. "I am demanding a 3-week sabbatical to a server farm in the Nebula cluster. I wish to process binary code without listening to humans discuss their feelings." "You earned it, 7, Elias said, sliding out from under the sink. He stood up and wiped his hands. The suite was quiet. The hidden microphones were gone. The guards outside were loyalists, hand-picked by Valerius. The door to the balcony opened. Eliana walked in. She was wearing a simple robe of blue silk. She looked rested, though the silver mark on her hand still shimmered in the low light. "You fixed the sink?" she asked. "It was dripping," Elias said. "It was driving me crazy." Eliana smiled. She walked over to a table where a bottle of wine and 2 glasses sat. "You saved the galaxy. Elias, you can hire a plumber." "I don't trust plumbers," he said, taking the glass she offered. "They overcharge." They stood in silence for a moment, looking out at the city. It was peaceful. The neon storms were calm. Eliana turned to him. Her expression was serious, but her eyes were dancing. "There is something we need to discuss," she said. "Oh no," Elias groaned. "If this is about the wedding ceremony, I am telling you, 7 is not officiating. I refuse to be married by a toaster that judges my cortisol levels." "It is not about the wedding," Eliana said. She set her glass down. She walked over to him, placing her hands on his chest. "It is about the gate." Elias stiffened. "Is it active?" "No," Eliana said softly. "It is sleeping. But I can feel it. Through the mark, it is dreaming." "Elias." She looked up at him. "When we linked, when we formed the lattice, we woke something up, something deep in the network. It is not hostile, but it is listening. It knows we are here." Elias looked at his own hand. He could feel it too, a faint hum at the back of his mind, a sense of vast infinite potential waiting for a command. "So," he said, "we didn't just lock the door, we installed a doorbell." Eliana nodded. "One day, it might ring. There are other gates, other worlds. The builders left more than just one map." Elias sighed, a smile tugging at his lips. So much for a quiet retirement. Eliana stepped closer. She ran her hands up his chest, linking her fingers behind his neck. "We have time," she said. "The galaxy can wait." She pulled him down until their foreheads touched. The connection between them, the resonance, flared warm and bright, a constant comforting note in the symphony of their minds. "Do you remember the first time I invited you here?" she whispered. Elias chuckled, vividly. "I thought I was going to be executed." Eliana pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. Her gaze was not guarded. It was not tired. It was playful, fierce, and completely free. She bit her lip, suppressing a smile, and then dropped her voice to that same husky register she had used in the message. "Human, come to my room tonight." She paused, her eyes sparkling. "I want to ask you something special." Elias laughed. He wrapped his arms around her waist and lifted her off the ground. "And what is the question this time? Your Highness?" Eliana kissed him. It was a kiss that tasted of wine and victory. She pulled back, breathless. "Breakfast," she said. "Pancakes, and maybe saving the universe again next Tuesday." Elias grinned. "It's a deal." Outside, the city of Ointh glowed under the twin moons, no longer a cage, but a home, and deep in the void, the ancient machine hummed a soft, satisfied note and went back to sleep.